Let's spend a few minutes discussing 5 key strategies that you can use to beat the ACT test and improve your ACT test score. My name is Rob Tracy, and I'm an instructor here at actbrainy.com. Now, if you are a college-bound junior or senior in high school, then the ACT test is probably one of the most important tests you will ever take in your life. Why? Well, first of all, your ACT score can have a huge impact on which college you get to go to. Understand that most colleges and universities are going to combine your high school GPA with your ACT score to determine whether or not they're even going to let you in the school. And here's the hard truth. The more prestigious the school, the harder it is to get in. And a good ACT score can really help you get into the college that you really want to attend. In addition, a low ACT score may completely torpedo your chances of getting a scholarship. Captain, we're going down! Most colleges and universities will award academic scholarships based on, you guessed it, your high school GPA and your ACT score. So as you can see, a solid ACT score is absolutely critical. But here is the key problem. Many, if not most, high school students do not take the ACT seriously at all. Dude, don't worry about it, man. Relax. They don't study, they don't prepare, they score poorly, and it impacts the rest of their life. Dude, would you like to supersize that meal, dude? Here's the thing I want you to remember. You need to take steps to prepare for the ACT test a long time in advance, like 2 to 3 months in advance. Don't blow it off. So let's review those 5 key strategies that you can use to help boost your ACT test score as much as possible. Let's begin with strategy number 1, where we bone up on our grammar for the English portion of the ACT test. Understand the English test on the ACT will really push your knowledge of English grammar rules. You've got to know them. Some of the more commonly tested rules are shown right here. First of all, the words there, and there are commonly misused, and you've got to know the right way to use them. Remember, the word there is used to indicate where something is. It identifies a place. On the other hand, the word there is a pronoun, and it's a possessive pronoun. It's a plural possessive pronoun that indicates who owns something. And then finally, we have there with an apostrophe. This word is a contraction of the words they and are. We put in the apostrophe and we squish them together. Also be careful with the word it's and its. This is very confusing, and you will see at least 1, probably 2, possibly even 3 questions on the English test that will misuse these 2 words. This pronoun right here, it's without an apostrophe, actually shows possession. No apostrophe. If you do see the pronoun it and an apostrophe s, what it is telling you is that that is a contraction of it plus either the word is or has. Also be aware that pronoun agreement errors are tested heavily on the ACT English test. Remember, a pronoun has to agree with the person or thing it's referring to in person, gender, and number, either singular or plural. In addition to pronoun agreement errors, verb agreement errors are also tested heavily on the ACT. Remember this, a singular subject requires a singular verb, while a plural subject requires a plural verb. So with that in mind, let's look at strategy number 2, where we're dealing with the ACT math test. Understand that you got to overclock your brain to do well on the math test. If you're not familiar with this term, overclock, it's a computer term. In the computer world, we can make a CPU run faster than it was intended to get better performance out of a computer. You need to do exactly the same thing on the math test. You got to overclock your brain, make it run faster than you are used to. Now here's the problem. The math test is the part of the ACT that frankly everyone hates and does most poorly on. In fact, most students only answer about half of the questions on the ACT math test correctly. Here's a list of some of the more commonly tested topics you're going to see on the ACT math test. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. These are not all the different topics you're going to see on the ACT test, but these are the ones that show up year after year after year. First of all, proportions and ratios. You got to know how to work with proportions and ratios to do well on the math test. In fact, there are a lot of questions on the math test that can be solved very easily if you convert the story problem into a simple ratio and then solve for a variable. Also, you need to know how to work with matrices. Remember how to add, subtract, and multiply matrices. Also be familiar with basic statistics such as mean, median, mode, and especially probability. The last couple of ACT tests that I have seen have had multiple probability questions on it, so you got to know how to set up a probability problem. Also be familiar with systems of equations. These are problems that have two variables involved, x and y, and you got to find out what the value of x is in terms of y or vice versa. Be familiar with factoring a polynomial. Be familiar with functions and how they work. Be familiar with graphing a function. Be familiar with inequalities. Be familiar with how to depict an inequality on the number line. Know how to work with quadratic equations. Be familiar with your coordinate geometry. That's our good old x, y coordinate plane, and we plot points on that plane and we draw lines and curves based on a function or formula. And also be familiar with your shape geometry. We're talking about working with circles and triangles and rectangles and parallelograms and so on. In fact, if I could give you one piece of advice, I would say be so familiar with the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. There are a lot of problems on the ACT math test that can be solved using this formula right here instead of the normal way of solving them. Now don't panic if you're not familiar with all of these different topics for the ACT math test. If you're weak on one of these topics, you can enroll in our math course on our website. You can use the URL that you see right here, and we'll provide you with a review of how to solve each of these different types of problems, along with several practice problems, so that when you hit the ACT math test, you feel confident instead of going, I don't remember how to do this because I haven't done it since the 8th grade. So with this in mind, let's take a look at a couple of quick tips for doing well on the math test. The first one deals with the trigonometry problems that are commonly seen on the math test. Understand that the ACT test usually only includes about 4 trig problems. You might see 5, but generally speaking, for the last year or two, I have only seen 4 on most of the tests. So if you are weak with trigonometry or you haven't even taken trig yet, you actually may be better off just focusing on your algebra and your geometry. Here's the dirty little secret. You can actually miss all 4 of these trig problems right here on the ACT math test. And as long as you know your algebra and geometry and do well on those problems, you can still score in the low 30s on the ACT. Also be aware that speed is absolutely critical on the ACT test. On the math test, you have 60 minutes to do 60 problems. That means you get 1 minute per problem, 60 seconds per problem. You need to take shortcuts. Now be aware that your math teacher would not approve of these shortcuts, but do we care? No, because we're not trying to please our math teacher. What we're trying to do is maximize our ACT test score. For example, you can use the substitution strategy, what I call the plug and chug strategy, some people call it back solving, and also a guessing strategy. Now, we do not have time to go into each of these strategies here. If you want to learn about these strategies, you can enroll in our math course that we talked about just a second ago. Go to this URL and enroll, and we'll cover all of these strategies in detail. Let's move on now and talk about the reading test. Strategy number 3 for the ACT test is to get in touch with your softer side for the reading test. Understand that the reading test is all about reading comprehension. It's composed of 4 passages of text that you have to be able to read and analyze. Now, in order to do well on the reading test, you need to be able to kind of get inside the author's head and understand what it is he or she is trying to say. That's why I say you need to get in touch with your softer side for the reading test. You kind of need to empathize with the author and try to figure out what it is he or she was trying to accomplish with their writing. You need to be able to quickly read each passage and analyze the audience. Who is it that the author's writing to? What is the author's main argument? What is it they're trying to convince you of? What are the supporting facts provided by the author? And what are the author's conclusions? So I'm going to tell you what most students do when they're answering questions on the reading test, and it's the wrong thing to do. They do not read the passage first. Instead, they go right to the first question, they read the question, and then they plow through the text trying to find the answer to question number 1. Then they do the same thing for question 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. That wastes time. What you need to do instead is read the entire passage through very quickly and also mark all of the key information within that passage before you try to answer any of the questions associated with that passage. Saves a lot of time. Now let's move on to the science test. This brings us to strategy number 4. Put on your Spock ears for the science test. Now, just like the math test, the ACT science test can be very intimidating for a lot of students because they think, you know what, science just ain't my thing. I don't do well at science. Now, here's the thing I want you to remember. You don't have to be good at science to do well on the science test. Now, the science test is going to present you with several passages that are adapted from actual science articles. And these articles can come from a wide variety of scientific disciplines, including astronomy, biology, chemistry, geology, meteorology, and physics. And because of this, most students panic because they say, I haven't taken astronomy. I've only taken biology. That's all my high school required. I don't know anything about meteorology. Well, guess what? An extensive science background is actually not required to do well on the science test. You do not need to take all of these classes. Why? Because you will not be tested on your knowledge of science facts on the ACT science test. This completely throws people because that's what they assume the science test is about. What is a cumulus cloud? It doesn't do that. Instead, on the science test, you're going to be required to read a scientific article and then analyze the information that it contains. So with that in mind, here's the key trick that you need to keep in mind when you're on the science test. Do not try to learn and understand the concepts that are being talked about within the passage. Instead, what you need to be able to do is just analyze the passage and find the specific data within it, even if you have no idea what that passage is even talking about. And that brings us to our fifth and final strategy, and that is to learn how to carefully manage your time when you're taking the ACT. If you remember nothing else from this video, please remember this one thing. They do not give you enough time to answer all of the questions on every subject test. You have to be very careful with how much time you spend on a given question. Why is this important? Well, it has to do with tip number 1 right here. Please remember that every question on the ACT is weighted exactly the same. Most students do not understand this. On the ACT, a wicked, hard question that makes your brain hurt is worth exactly the same number of points as a ridiculously easy question. What does this mean? It means you should not spend a lot of time on the ACT trying to solve a super hard question. Because there's a limited amount of time, if you blow all that time trying to solve one hard question, you're not going to have time to answer a whole bunch of easy questions that are worth exactly the same number of points. So, if you hit a really hard question on the ACT that's obviously going to take a long time to solve, skip it immediately. Do not waste time on it. Go on and answer the other questions, the easier questions on the ACT that you can answer quickly. Then, if you have any time left, come back and use that time to tackle the hard questions that you skipped. So as you can see from these 5 strategies, the ACT test is no cakewalk. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to do well. Here at actbrainy.com, we specialize in preparing students for the ACT test. Our courses are both affordable and highly effective. Our students typically boost their ACT score by about 4 to upwards of 6 points after completing our courses. So the time to prepare is now. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the night before to start getting ready for the ACT test. On this page, you should see a promo code that you can use on any of our ACT test prep courses. With this promo code, you can boost your ACT score. Some of our courses cost less than $100. That is a great way to invest in yourself.